Hey guys, before we get into the show, I want to highlight that we are launching the first Smart People Podcast Mastermind webinar on March 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The expert putting on that webinar is the man, Dave Burse. You may remember Dave from episode 174 when we talked about how to be creative. Companies pay him tons of money to either speak or consult them on how to be creative, but he is going to do it for Smart People Podcast for free. In this webinar, he will be teaching you 6 tips to make anyone more creative. So just go to smartpeoplepodcast.com/burse, that's BIRSS, and reserve your limited seat in the webinar on March 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, that's smartpeoplepodcast.com/burse, BIRSS. Now on to the show.
The podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people.
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. Got a great one for you today, guys. We are interviewing Andrew Cockburn, and he is the author of the new book, Kill Chain, The Rise of the High-Tech Assassins. Sounds pretty badass, huh? Well, it is. So what is the kill chain? Well, we're going to get into that in the episode, but essentially what we're talking about here is the fact that through drone warfare and really the new ways that war is being conducted, the face of war has changed. And you no longer are there face to face. We're just dropping bombs from the sky. And what that does, what is the chain of command that can tell somebody to do that? What does it do to the pilots who are really playing what seems like video games? As you can imagine, there's all sorts of implications of bringing this type of technology into such a already complicated thing such as war. So I really thought this was timely. I mean, something we all need to be a little bit more educated about. And Andrew really is an expert on this. He is the Washington editor of Harper's Magazine and the author of many articles and books on national security, including the New York Times Editor's Choice Rumsfeld and The Threat. He's a regular contributor to the LA Times, and he's written for the New York Times, National Geographic, London Review of Books, etc. So can't wait to turn it over to Andrew. Also, as you heard in the pre-roll, I'm so excited to be bringing the first Smart People Podcast Mastermind. Make sure you sign up because we are going to limit the number of seats. So go to smartpeoplepodcast.com/burse, BIRSS. And this is kind of to give you a taste of what we are going to do. We have 6 of these booked already. 6 webinars booked. We are doing the mastermind. It is happening. So sign up, check it out, and then we'll tell you what's coming next. Oh, and Dave wanted me to mention, this is not just just sit on a webinar and hang out and maybe get something interesting. He plans to give you real strategies that you can use and work on, even during the session, to become more creative. So again, that's smartpeoplepodcast.com/burst. Thanks for that. As always, you can get in touch with us at Twitter at smartpeoplepod. We love hearing from you. Now we're going to get on to our show with Andrew Cockburn as we discuss his new book, Kill Chain, The Rise of the High-Tech Assassins. Enjoy. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show. Really excited to have you on and talk about a subject that extremely relevant, and especially people here in America just don't understand a lot of what's going on. So first, I just want to say thanks again for being on.
Oh, you're welcome.
So today we're going to be focusing on your brand new book, Kill Chain, The Rise of the High-Tech Assassins. Well, first I want to ask, did you choose that title or was that your publisher?
I chose it. I was stuck. I thought of Kill Chain a long time ago. That's really what the book's about, the rise of the whole concept of, high-tech assassination, which is really our principal military strategy these days. That's why it is.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because it definitely grabs you, and it's, there's fear in there. But it took me a minute because, okay, I'm thinking kill chain, kind of get that. High-tech assassins, I'm like, so many people have this view, I think, of assassinations as, a sniper. It comes from a gun. At least that's how I think of it. And so it's almost a mind bend, and I think that's kind of what you were going for, to say, look, that doesn't really happen. Now it's like a video game, and we're able to pick people off all around the world.
That's right. That's exactly, well, video game is exactly it, because it's really, it's done by video. We have this incredibly complex and, needless to say, extraordinarily expensive network covering the globe, or most of it, streaming video back all the time. I mean, you have these centers around this country. I've actually been in one. They're very hard to get into. They're very highly classified, where you have hundreds and hundreds of young men and women sitting looking at video screens, and it's where all the video from all the drones and all the reconnaissance planes and all the satellites and everything else comes in, or they can look at any of that, and the idea is they fuse the intelligence. They can absolutely monitor what's going on, feed in all the intelligence, and feed it back out to the drone operators, and carry on with the assassination. It's a very, very sort of science fiction kind of situation.
It is, and for people such as myself, unless you think about it from a very, nation-centric way in America, go, well, this is great. We don't have to spare our troops. We don't have to use our troops, and we can kill the bad guys. And technology, man, it's great. But what your book really highlights, and I think anyone who dives in a little deeper or even thinks a little more deeply, is the toll all around on this new ability to kill people silently across the world without ever seeing them.
Well, that's right. But it's not as great as it sounds. First of all, as you said, the toll. You mentioned the toll it takes. I mean, it makes us unbelievably unpopular.
Yeah.
Even more than with bombing by conventional weapons, it seems. Stanley McChrystal, who ran the Joint Special Operations Command, and then which is like the military side of this assassination business, and after that was the commander in Afghanistan, as you probably know. He said, there's no single factor that makes us so as unpopular as these drone campaigns, the effect it has on people on the ground. So there's that. And I just want to emphasize how traumatic it is for people like people in the tribal areas of Pakistan, which have been a focus of our very intensive CIA drone campaign for years and years now. It's a place where children don't play outside on sunny days because they know the drone can see them. People are afraid to go to, they don't have wedding parties anymore. They don't have funerals anymore because, they could at any moment, a Hellfire missile comes streaking out of the sky and, they're incinerated. Always you hear the constant buzzing, the buzzing noise of the drones, as they fly ceaselessly overhead.
So you can hear the drones?
Oh yeah, it sounds like a sort of particularly annoying lawnmower.
I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine knowing that at any moment, due to either a mistake or somebody who we really want dead is close to you, at any moment your life could be over due to a bomb. Right. I can't. Right. I can't. Sort
of out of nowhere. So that's one factor. But the other reason, I mean, as you said just a minute ago, why it's appealing, because you think, no Americans get killed. It's all safe and clinical, sort of out of sight and out of earshot, certainly to people here. But the basic problem is that it doesn't work so well. I mean, it doesn't get you to where you want to go. I mean, the whole presumption of this drone assassination campaign, and it's not I should talk about in a second, it's not the only kind of assassination campaign we do, is that it's going to get you where you want to be. In other words, that the terrorist network that you feel threatened by is going to go away because you're going to have assassinated relevant people in it, and your problem will be solved. And that doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It's plain for all to see. 9/11, 9/11. That was, planned by Al Qaeda, but Al Qaeda at that time consisted of a few hundred people, sort of hiding in caves and whatever in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or in the slums of Pakistani cities. Now, we have ISIS, that occupies an area the size of Indiana, 6, 7 million people under its direct control. We have other groups, as lethal, spread out across the Middle East. We have, and been further into Asia. I was just hearing about in Indonesia and in Bangladesh, the same thing is about. So whatever else it's done, our drone assassination campaign hasn't really worked so well. So for all the grief we've caused and all the enemies we've made, it hasn't really got us an advantage.
Would it be fair to say, though, that that's a little bit of an overstatement that the drone campaign caused that? In more so, it was caused by, you could say, the success of 9/11 brought more people to say, hey, we can do something to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, sure. I'm not saying that it's thanks to the drone campaign, ISIS now controls, half Iraq. What I'm saying is the drone campaign was set up, was launched to solve a problem. And the problem has gotten worse. It did not solve it.
Yeah.
And the problem has gotten worse.
And I always think, I talk to people about this every now and again, and if you try to think with a little bit of empathy, if roles were reversed and a bomb got dropped on your family or anyone you loved, and you were a citizen, just a normal non-terrorist, whatever, if that were me, I'd probably be willing to go to war. You just turned me into a soldier.
Yeah. That's always, certainly true, and that's
it makes sense.
Bomb, but the sort of the random nature of this is what's particularly insidious.
Right. Well, let's start from the beginning, because one of the things that you do a great job of in your book is talking about how drone warfare came about and how it's not really a new thing. It's just slightly new technology. So take us back to the start of, or what you dubbed the start of this.
Well, the start of it, I think, you can go back to a number of starting points.
Mm-hmm.
The first drone was actually developed in 1916 for use in trench warfare, and it really set some basic themes for drones, it was extremely inaccurate. It was quite inaccurate and very unreliable and crashed all the time. Anyway, but moving quickly forward, I talk early in the book. I talk about a thing which seems unrelated but really is very connected, which is during the Vietnam War, the American High Command saw as its basic problem the fact that the North Vietnamese could always send reinforcement, and was sending all its supplies and reinforcements down this network of jungle trails called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they came to the conclusion that if they could cut that off, if they could make, just intercept that flow, then the problems would be solved and the war would be won. So the way they decided to do it was to build an electronic fence, which was consisted of thousands of sensors strewn across the jungle, which could pick up sound, could pick up smell, could pick up movement, and each of these sensors would radio back this information basically to a giant computer in Thailand. And the computer would figure out, say, from these sounds, from these messages, it's getting, there's obviously a North Vietnamese supply column heading here, and so then automatically send out signals to bombers, which would then bomb it, and the North Vietnamese would be destroyed. Well, it didn't work for all sorts of reasons, which are jolly interesting, and people have to read the book to discover what they were. But the basic idea that of remote control warfare, which is what this was, that the idea was that you could have perfect information, that you could know where the enemy was and identify him by electronic means, and then you could therefore use that information to just strike him with pinpoint accuracy, which was the claim, and destroy him, and thus solve your problem. That's directly related to drone warfare, because it's the same idea. We have all these drones flying around, which they say which are relaying back videos, so you can find your enemy, you can study him for days, weeks on end, and get his what they call patterns of life. And then when the time comes and you decided that he really is who you think he is, you can launch a missile and basically hit him with absolute accuracy. It's the same concept of remote control, sort of almost automated, very mechanistic warfare. And what it doesn't take account of is that the enemy has a brain, which is kind of a cliched statement. But, the military men like to say it, like to declare that, even if they don't usually act on it. And that that the enemy reacts. So in the case of the Vietnam, the electronic fence, the Vietnamese quickly figured out what was going on and took steps to spoof the sensors, and they'd run a herd of cattle up and down the trail to mimic this, which sounded like trucks. So the computer would think, oh, that's trucks, and would send bombers to bomb them. Or in a variety of means. So the enemy very quickly figured out what was going on. It took them a week, actually. And the same way with the drones. That the drones have failed for two reasons, and one of them is that that Al Qaeda, for instance, in Pakistan, have figured out what was going on. So they take steps not to meet in a public place, not to camouflage their vehicles. They've discovered that the drones, for example, they found once a very simple set of instructions on how to deal with drones, and which suggestions from various Al Qaeda commanders, one of which came from Osama bin Laden himself, which said park under a tree because the drone can't see you, and the whole variety of things like that. I just want to get on to the other reason why this hasn't worked. Is this. The whole notion of assassination is built on the principle that if you pick off the key guy, you can identify who the key guy is thanks to your marvelous, all-knowing electronic intelligence. And once you've done that, then you pick him off, and then with their leader gone, the enemy, falls apart or is, defeated or is certainly very much weakened. And it turns out that absolutely the opposite is the case. That every time when you do pick off the leader, and this isn't just supposition, this is what has happened. This is the experience of Iraq and Afghanistan and another conflict I'll talk about in a sec. That he's almost immediately replaced, and the new guy tends to be worse from your point of view. Mm-hmm. He's usually out for revenge. He's usually younger. They tend to be sort of more fierce, sort of more determined fighters. Quite often it's a relative, so want to, avenge Uncle Ahmed. Or else, the previous guy, whoever it might have been, old Muhammad, was getting a bit lazy and wasn't really pressing, attacks as hard as he should have been. I'm going to show people. So the new person's out to prove themselves. And this has turned out to be invariably the case. In fact, I can quote, for the first time in this book, I reveal that an very brilliant intelligence analyst in Iraq, a guy called Rex Ravallo, sort of wondered. Everyone said, this is the strategy. They called it HVI, high value individual, or HVT, high value target. And everything was built around that. Get the high value individuals, HVIs. And he wondered, well, what if this is actually working? So he got it, because he had access to all the intelligence. He got the list of 200 people they'd killed or captured sometimes in the previous, I think it was 4 or 5 months. This was in 2007. Then he looked to see what had happened in that target's area after he was killed. And, had attacks gone up, or, had things got better for the Americans or gotten worse? Well, it turned out they'd gotten significantly worse, that attacks on Americans went up by 40% in 3 days. Then after 5 days, they were still up 20%, and then it kind of tailed off after that. Mm-hmm. So this was clear evidence that it wasn't just that killing any enemy leaders, these were local insurgent cell leaders, I should say. Killing enemy leaders wasn't that it did you any good. It actually made life worse. And I just want to mention the other case of where this has been shown not to work, where we've had some further confirmation very recently, which is this idea was really had its first run through in the drug war in the 1990s. The DEA, which up till then had been a kind of a sort of poor stepsister, sort of Cinderella agency, sort of bullied by the FBI and always short of money and so forth. They had a rather capable, ambitious, certainly new director called Bonner. And he, with some others, conceived the idea of the kingpin strategy, that they were going to stop paying so much attention to trying to intercept shipments of cocaine coming into the country. And they were instead going to go after the leaders of the cartels, which in those days was the infamous Colombian cartels of Medellin and Cali.
Mm-hmm.
So this was going to be the strategy, to get the kingpins. And it was very successful. First of all, they managed to kill the leader of the Medellin cartel, Pablo Escobar, and then a couple of years later, they captured, or killed in some cases, or else captured the leaders of the Cali cartel. Well, that was great, but what did this have to do with the supply of drugs? And it turned out it wasn't very. It boosted the supply of drugs immediately, because what happened when you take away the leadership of the cartel, then you get people battling for the trade.
Mm-hmm.
You get rival cartels. The cartel splits, different people wanting to be leader, and they compete on supply. So the price comes down. So, it was Rex Ravallo, the same guy, who figured this out, because he'd been assigned to do some research on this at the Pentagon at the time. And he found that, the price, every time they knocked off a cartel leader, the price of cocaine went down. And, more people could take it. So this is, and just to finish up on that point, we've seen this recently with the capture of Sean Penn's best friend,
yes,
El Chapo, Mr. Guzman. What do we have now? He controlled the giant Sinaloa cartel. Now I keep hearing that there are smaller but more vicious cartels springing up,
mm-hmm.
who are battling for the trade. So life is actually, and the price of heroin is coming down. It's really on every count. This is a very stupid strategy, which we show no sign of abandoning. And that's, a large part of my book is about that.
Yeah, it is. And you do talk about how really the, war is not about engineering, right? And the
Yes.
folks that benefit from that in the end are especially here, because this is what we do. And I live just outside of DC. I have friends, but it's the contractors. That's who it is. It's the military contractors who are like, oh, I just saw that the Pentagon's asking for a new budget of over $500 billion this year.
Yeah.
That can buy a lot of drones.
And actually, by the time you add it all up, including money they don't immediately sort of include in that, like the money that goes for the nuclear weapons through the Department of Energy and various other areas too, you can actually push it up to close to $1 trillion if you want. But yes, drones is going to buy a lot of drones. In fact, they're talking about doubling the drone force in a few years. It's the wave of the future. Yeah, there's something I'm glad you brought this up, because it's very important to remember that the military-industrial complex exists for its own benefit. Defense, an effective defense, is kind of a sideline. Or an excuse, really, to for us, the taxpayers, to give them the money. But time and again, I've been looking at this for decades now, and time again, you see what they're doing, what they want to do, is enormously beneficial for them in bureaucratic and financial terms, both for the contractors and for the internal defense bureaucracies, and they're all sort of related to each other. And not so good for us. There's a current example. I don't want to stray too far off the point, but there's a current example in the F-35 fighter, which is the new fighter plane, which is so automated it might as well be a drone. The pilot is basically a flying computer. It's very ineffective. Every honest report, every test report shows that it's a total clunker. It's a 200, the program is going to cost us probably $1.5 trillion by the time we're done.
To build this one plane?
To build the whole program.
I mean, but this plane's program.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. $1.5 trillion. And as an instrument of war, it's really not very useful. I mean, I could go on for an hour on this. It can't fly when there's a thunderstorm within 25 miles because they're worried about lightning. Is particularly sensitive to lightning. If the pilot weighs less than 136 pounds, he breaks his neck. I could go on. Anyway, so the thing should obviously be discarded right away, but now we're proceeding because it is of enormous benefit to hundreds of corporations led by the Lockheed Corporation and hundreds of congressional districts and whole fleets of bureaucrats in and out of uniform in the Pentagon. So anyway, that's why, going back to drones and assassination, that in my view is why we pursue what is obviously a very flawed, very dangerous and counterproductive strategy, because it suits certain imperatives domestically.
And see, I mean, yes, that makes sense. But on the flip side, and I can't remember, I think a friend told me about this. I can't remember if it was in your book, but it might have been the reason why I found your book. The story about we actually saw, the way drones came about, we saw Osama bin Laden with a drone.
Oh, yes.
But we didn't have the ability to kill him.
Well, let me slightly amend that.
Okay, thank you.
We saw what we thought was Osama bin Laden.
Okay.
There was this drone, the Predator, which initially was was developed as a reconnaissance vehicle to sort of fly around and take video, and which would be either first taken back and then sort of immediately radioed back what was going on the ground. And in September 2000, late 2000, CIA was flying a drone over Afghanistan, and they went over an area, a compound called Tarnak Farms, I think it was called, where it was thought that Osama sometimes could be found. And when they looked at the pictures, oh my God, there was a white dot. I mean, I've actually looked at these pictures. There's a white dot surrounded by black dots. I mean, they seem to be human. They seem to be moving. If you blew it up, it just became blurred. So, and they concluded from this had to be Osama bin Laden. And those black dots, and I even heard someone say, well, they seem to be acting in a deferential manner. I don't know what a deferential black dot looks like. But anyway, they had to be his bodyguards. Oh my God, if only we'd had a missile, we could have taken care of the whole problem right now. So they had a crash program to put a missile on the drone, which actually they did quite quickly. And we were off to the races. That one picture launched, it's responsible, I'd say, for the deaths of, many thousands of people. And we still don't know. We never knew for sure if it was Osama or not. It could easily not have been, because that area, there was a lot of rich Arabs from the Gulf used to go to that area to go hunting. It was someone wearing white. That was it. And, we're still killing people on that basis.
Well, and I can understand if we're not able to identify a person. So in that example, say we were able to 100% or 99.9%, whatever, say, you know what, that's bin Laden. I think it'd be a hard side to choose when you say, okay, that might be, but we shouldn't bomb him from this drone. You know what I mean? So understanding all of the issues, how do you look at the other side and say, yeah, but at its core, we've created these things that can find bad people and with minimal damage to our own troops, our own people, take that target out. Now, I understand the arguments you made, and I'm not taking a stance on it, but how would you defend against that, against that argument?
Well, I say, what are you trying to achieve? what is the object of this exercise? Is it just to vent your spleen at someone who is, unquestionably a bad person, make you feel better, make you, if you're a politician, help you win the next election? If that's what you want to do, well, fine, proceed. If you want to somehow alter a situation in which your, security is affected by, terrorism, these sort of, whatever you want to call them, these people who wish you ill, then maybe, and experience seems to be showing, this is not such a great idea. I think it all comes down to that. What do you have in mind? Like that example of the drug war I quoted a minute ago. What is the object of the exercise? It turned out, what the object of their exercise was, we don't like these cartels. They're so rich and successful and arrogant. We're going to, destroy them. Well, okay, they succeeded in that. But the object of their exercise, the DEA's exercise, was meant to be to take care of the drug problem in this country, or at least to diminish it. And that had precisely the opposite effect. So I wish they just asked themselves that question more often. They always pose, these very fake things like, the ticking time bomb. Well, this applies to a different debate, the torture debate. If there's they always find an excuse for doing stupid things. I think.
And now a quick word from this week's sponsor. Listen up. We all struggle with productivity. We're constantly under pressure to accomplish more and do it faster. There's no one definitive way to accomplish that, so we devise our own methods to make things work. Igloo can help you keep doing things your way, only better. Collaboration shouldn't be painful. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like. Igloo provides corporate communications, team collaboration, knowledge management, and social workflow. Head over to their website and check it out today. Sign up now and try it for free at igloosoftware.com/smartpeople. That's igloosoftware.com/smartpeople. Thank you to the fine folks over at Igloo for sponsoring this week's episode of Smart People Podcast. And now back to the episode.
That's interesting because I do understand what you're saying, especially regarding the drug war. I mean, but I almost look at it and say, Osama bin Laden's in charge of 9/11, we can wage an all-out war, get thousands of soldiers killed, or we can fly a drone over there, find them, and do it that way. That's the end of Osama bin Laden. I feel like maybe the answer is, okay, we use the drones on a smaller scale to take out these high-value targets, as as we call them, HVTs, but we take 400 billion of the 500 and put it towards more proven or whatever methods of quelling terrorism. I mean, is that a fair? I'm not asking for you to solve it. I'm just trying to think of. Sure. It's really tough to say, look, these work in the goal of taking out somebody easier than they don't work.
Yeah. Well, let's move off the abstract. Initially, post 9/11, I think the list of people, Bush had a list he kept in his desk of people they decided they had to kill. Mm-hmm. It was something like 12 names on it. Okay, mm-hmm. It's quite limited, just 12 people. We've got to get there. Really, really, really bad people. We have to eliminate them. But then that became, oh my God, well, there's some other people we didn't know about. So the list became 20 people. And then, okay, we got a couple of the top ones, but now there's, 6 other people we've discovered. And the list became 20, 30, 40, 50, and eventually ended up in the thousands.
Wow.
In the thousands. And that's what always happens in this. I mean, I just want to refer back at another historical thing, which is the World War II. I talk about this in the book. At the beginning, just before the beginning of America got into World War II, the Air Force, or the Army Air Force, as it was called then, had done their war plan for if they had war with Germany. And they figured out that there was 154 targets in Germany, which if they were destroyed, the German war machine would come to a halt and the war would be over and we'd have won. So they went off when the war started. They went off and attacked those 154 targets and managed to destroy one or two of them, or more than one or two probably. But then the list became found there was another 150 targets they hadn't thought of, which were equally crucial. And then another 150, and then the ones they destroyed had been rebuilt somewhere else, or they'd find. It just always happens whenever this idea of precision warfare, the sort of magic bullet. It never works that way. I don't want to, in case you think I'm sounding arrogant, I just say it hasn't. I defy anyone to find a contrary example. So that's why I say, that call you mentioned. I mean, two things would happen. One is, they say, okay, we'll get rid of the top guy and we'll spend $400 billion on, improving people's lives. Well, first of all, you discover there's 10 top guys you have to get rid of, and then more. And the $400 billion you'll find is all being siphoned off into contractors' pockets. I just want to refer people to the ongoing reports by the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, who's been looking into what happened to the $100 billion that we were spending, that we spent ostensibly for the benefit of the Afghan people, the reconstruction money.
Yes.
And it turns out that, almost all of that was effectively, I don't know, stolen is too strong a word, but diverted, or at least used in ineffectual, if not fraudulent ways. So it's anyway, that's an afterthought. But
well, it's actually it may be an afterthought, but it's a very important part. And it, again, as we've talked about, it's a lot of what's covered in your book, Kill Chain. But it's one of those things that's not really talked about. It's not really, it's seen as a necessity. And I know friends who have worked for the government talk about the way in which the government bids, does requests for proposals, and how there's this bidding structure, and it's supposed to create almost a free market, if you will. But even if that's the case, it's just the fact that the reason these contractors stay in business is, or not the reason, the way they stay in business is to take a massive amount of the resources for just running their organization.
Yeah. I mean, they're just sticking it in their pockets. I mean, I don't want to get too far away from Kill Chain, but I mean, there's a scandal. I talked to Mr. Sopko, the Inspector General, about this, where they found there was some group administered by the Army, by the Department of Defense, which were meant to be improving Afghan business, helping the Afghans to set up, helping the Afghan economy. And it turned out they spent a huge chunk of the money on building themselves a 5-star hotel, the contractors on the outskirts of Kabul, including, and it's specified in the contract that the lunch menu in the dining room should have at least 3 entrees. I remember, anyway, and each room should have a 30-inch TV. It's just, it gets, I mean, in the way this relates to what we're talking about, what I talk about in the book, which is the complex, the military-industrial complex, and including as applied to drones, it'll pursue its own interests rather than those that you think that you're paying it to perform, unless you keep a very close eye on it. And that's what happened with, I just tell the story of the company that makes the drones. I mean, the killer drones, the Predators and Reapers. That's a company called General Atomics, which is, again, it's kind of a complicated story, but I urge people to read it. And it gives you kind of an uncomfortable feeling that these people are really on the cutting edge of what is our, main strategy for military strategy for dealing with the outside world.
Is there any way, because I know I've read it, it is a kind of complicated topic, but could you sum up what happened with them?
Well, it was a pair of brothers called Blue, Neil and Lyndon Blue, who they were a couple of rich kids who originally they decided to get into the nuclear business, and they bought this company, General Atomics, and invested in basically sort of uranium processing of a particularly environmentally filthy kind of way. I remember around one of their sites, someone discovered a 9-legged frog. They were always getting sued. I mean, they left a sort of trail of environmental ruin behind them. Then they decided that there should be money in military contracts. So they hired an ex-Navy admiral and set him to work, sort of, trolling his contacts in the Pentagon. And he came up with an idea for a drone called the Predator, which would be able to deliver small nuclear weapons. And that design never worked, and it crashed all the time. But then they found this very eccentric and incredibly bad-tempered Israeli called Abraham Karem, who'd been talking about drones for years and years and years. And he had actually designed what was the sort of prototype of the Predator we know and love today. But anyway, so they managed to get a contract from initially the Navy and then the Air Force to build it, thanks basically to a guy called Jerry. His name's, sorry, I'm blanking on it.
Oh, that's okay.
It was a guy who was named, I think, 3 or 4 times in the top 20 lists of the top 20 in the list of the top 20 most corrupt congressmen in Washington.
Wow.
He was the congressman for Santa Barbara, and he basically, in the time-honored Washington way, in receipt of considerable funds from General Atomics, the contract came to pass. And what really made it all happen was the Kosovo War, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned, suddenly we had the Predator, which could send back streaming video and show you what was happening on the battlefield. It couldn't show you very much of what was happening on the battlefield. It could show you something the size of a tennis court or two.
Mm-hmm.
But this was very enthralling for the top commanders. I know from a friend of mine who worked in the office of Wesley Clark, who was the supreme Allied commander running the war, that he would spend hours every day sitting at his desk watching the drone feed on the monitor on his desk.
Wow.
It wasn't really telling him very much, but it gave him the feeling that he was really in touch with the battlefield. It was really exciting. There he was sitting in Belgium, and so it was. This feeds into another aspect which I talk about quite a lot in Kill Chain, which is this false sense of engagement, of being in touch that the drones give to the whole command structure. That the commanders are sitting there like this clown Clark during that war, and they're watching the feed, and they're acting like sort of platoon commanders. They're directing attacks on a single tank, which has all sorts of very bad effects on the whole system of running a battle or running a war. First of all, people on the ground hate it because suddenly you have this, this 4-star general,
right?
Sort of telling you what to do when you're right there and you can see what to do. Better than someone sitting 3,000 miles away, watching TV. Anyway, that's one effect of it. Anyway, it's worth. Sorry, we could go on quite a while, but that's yet another very key part of the real drone story, which you don't see too much about in the papers.
Yeah, it is. And, I know we got to wrap this up here, but one of the things that really defines your book is the access that you had, the information that you had, the inside track. How do you do that? How do you get that?
Well, I've been doing this for quite a long time. So, and sort of on subjects like this, and sort of, so you do that. You get to, first of all, 2 things. Once you get to know people, and sort of people trust you, and they tell other people to trust you, which is, I'm very honored by the trust that various people inside the system gave me when working on this. And the other is you get a feel for it. So when someone says, we have unmatched accuracy or incredible ability to fuse intelligence from multiple sources to tell us exactly what's going on, they're talking BS.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to then you go and look to see what's really going on. So it's that. It's just having a lot. I mean, I checked everything, but quite a lot of the sort of ideas I had in the book that I put in the book, I'd sort of initially suspect, well, that has to be the case. Like, like an example I tell of someone who got killed in Afghanistan. They spent, using all the high tech methods. They tracked what they thought was a Taliban commander for days and days and days. And I remember hearing that this guy had been killed, and I thought, I wonder if they got the right guy. I don't know. I just remember this little stray thought, and turned out it was some completely innocent person. They tracked people through the phones, and they'd got the phone numbers mixed up.
How is that story not told more often? I mean, that, you know what I mean?
Because people want, first of all, the way defense coverage or coverage of any government any institution works is, most of the time, especially if you're a daily reporter, I mean, I have every sympathy with this. You have to have access. You can't operate outside the system all the time, because you have to be told what's going on. I mean, and unfortunately, people go overboard on this. So you get a very sort of, in many cases, you get a very tame press corps. That's certainly not, totally. I don't want to go overboard on that, but that's certainly a factor. But people, it's true that, and especially with technology, people. This is society is in love with technology. We have all the more and more incredible, miraculous technological gadgets we get to fool with, our smartphones and so forth. So when someone makes a technological claim for something, that we have a plane that can be invisible to radar now, or we have a robot that can, figure out friend from foe, all that people sort of tend to accept it without thinking, wait a minute, how does that work? Does that really work? How could it work? And which is what they should be doing. But I can see how people fall into that trap.
Sure.
Unless they read Kill Chain, then they'll know better.
I was just about to say, well, Andrew, I know you got to go. I really appreciate your time. The book is, as of this, the time this airs, will be just have come out in paperback. It's Kill Chain, The Rise of the High-Tech Assassins. We'll link to it on smartpeoplepodcast.com. And I wanted to say, if anything, to read this book, to be educated and look at it without bias, I think you would admit that you might have inserted a little bit of bias of your own way in this, in that, saying there's really no use for this. But don't you think it kind of puts some light on the subject in a way that oftentimes we only see the other side?
Well, that's right. I mean, I think, sure, I have my own, I have my own views. I don't have bias. Everyone, no one is unbiased.
Right,
Everyone
true.
has their own views to things. So sure, I have my own views. And I will concede that I have had, particularly lower ranking military officers, people who've been in the field in Afghanistan and places, say, well, sometimes it's useful, but then in the next breath they tell me why. They tell me some disaster story where it led to killing the wrong guy or something. But yeah, of course, there's always things. But I think I don't know. I think my book. I'd like to think my book is fair, which is the important thing. Is takes an objective look. I mean, usually people say you're biased when they just don't agree with you. So
I like that. I'm going to quote that. No, but I, like I said, I've read it. Really enlightening, fantastic stories. You cram a ton of information in a way that to the layman is understandable and exciting, and educational. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anywhere else that you write or anything else you want to let the listeners know about, or where to find you?
Sure. I glory in the title of Washington editor of Harper's Magazine, which basically means I do you'll find every 3 months you find a long article from me in Harper's about whatever happens to be interesting me at the time, not necessarily to do with Washington, which now you can find if you go to harpers.org. You can just type in my name, Andrew Cockburn. You can access my pieces. I do shorter pieces for their online edition. So that's my main. That's my day job these days.
And you're on Twitter. I think that's how we got in touch, right?
And that is indeed how I'm on Twitter, where I can venting my spleen on whatever's annoying me that day.
What's your Twitter handle for everybody?
Andrew M. Cockburn. ANDREM. Andrew M. Then COCKBURN.
Perfect. Again, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I will be sure to shoot you a link via email when this goes live around just after March 8th.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Andrew Cockburn. Andrew's book, Kill Chain, The Rise of the High-Tech Assassins, can be found on Amazon or at your local bookstore. If you decide to purchase the book through Amazon, please don't forget to use the Smart People Podcast Amazon link located at smartpeoplepodcast.com/Amazon. If you're looking for other free and easy ways to support the show, please head over to iTunes and Stitcher. Leave a rating, review, and comment over there. It truly does help out the show. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, please shoot us an email at smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at smartpeoplepod. As Chris mentioned in the intro, we're going to have more information coming out about the Smart People Podcast Mastermind, so stay tuned for that. We've got some great episodes coming up, and we'll see you all next week.